Hello everyone. I am going to continue looking at games in the Benoni. Let's start. Oh, e6 is also a possible move order to reach the Benoni. Knight f3, c5, d6, knight c3, g6, and bishop f4 is our system. And as I said yesterday, there is this annoying looking move knight h5, maybe that could force our bishop away from this diagonal where it's very nicely attacking the pawn on d6, but it's not working so well for black. I mean, of course, moving the same piece for the second time while white already has three minor pieces out is already something which could bring trouble for black. So bishop g5 is the correct move, winning tempo on the queen. And basically here black has two options. Bishop to e7 or pawn to f6. These two moves are playable. I already mentioned it that in the previous video that after queen b6, white has this very annoying move, queen a4. So basically, if you know this move, you are going to win the game. Knight d7 or bishop d7 are possible. I mean, knight d7 is a little bit longer variation, but after queen e4, check, knight e5, knight takes on e5. The game is pretty much decided. Black is recapturing its check, and we can also take the rook amongst other things. So queen b6 not working. So, but there are two moves here, as I said, and okay, let's start with bishop e7. So bishop e7 here, obviously we don't trade. I mean, with that we would just help black, and this trade of the dark squared bishops is not bad at all for our opponent. Now the d6 pawn is quite okay, and he can maybe continue with f5, short castle, and so on. It's nothing too bad, but what is unpleasant for black if we play bishop to h6. Obviously, it makes castling impossible. So black doesn't really have a big choice here because okay, without castling, it's just impossible to play. So white can just continue normally. Like we don't even have to play e3 in such positions. We can go with e4, of course, and then bring out the bishop to e2, d3, maybe b5, and then castle. So it's just a big advantage if black is doing nothing. So black has to play this move bishop f8. So basically it's already offering a repetition. So if a draw is comfortable for you, then you can play bishop g5, but I would definitely not advise that thing. First of all, the line is good, and I mean the game is just starting, so there is an option to take on f8, but again, it's not horrible for black. I mean, it is good for white, but still, we are helping a little bit for the king to get to g7, and okay, it's almost once the rook is coming, it's basically an artificial castling, which completely fine for black. So here on bishop f8, what is a strong move is queen to d2. So basically just protecting the bishop on h6. If black is trading, then we can just replace the bishop with the queen, which is the same way, I mean in the similar way, preventing short castle, and it's a very annoying piece to get rid of. So this looks like just a good move. And yeah, it's a question now how to continue with black, because it's really, tough to force white to make any decisions. And I mean, we are just in a completely good position to continue with e4 and then developing the bishop and castle. So that's what we want, and somehow black should do something. So in the game, a6 was played. I mean, okay, this with the idea of playing b5, it can be played all the time. And now a4. So one thing I would like to mention, of course, a4 I recommend you to play. Just one thing, that when the queen is already out on d2, then taking on f8 is an improved version to normal bishop takes f8 lines, because now, of course, the king wants to take, but then the queen can come to h6 and the king is not reaching this g7 square. So this is already something to consider. I wouldn't do this because black still can play some king to g8 and then maybe kick our queen from h6, but I mean it's already an improvement. So okay, on a6, a4, just preventing b5, and now bishop g4 was played in this game which we are following, Jakovic versus Pereligin. I mean, it's a normal looking developing move. It's hard to criticize. I mean, I looked at another move which I believe also can be a normal one, to play bishop g7. So it looks very strange that, okay, black is developing in a way that the knight is covering the bishop, and now they want to castle. So of course, if we are waiting for short castle, then again the king can recapture on g7, and in general that's something we don't want. So this is a very ideal moment to take on g7. Knight takes g7. Also, the knight is completely misplaced on g7. It always wants to be on f6 pretty much to put some pressure in our center on g7. I mean, it's square for the bishop. Knight looks just funny there, but it's not a goal to be funny. So, and again, this queen h6 is annoying here. So just to replace the bishop, and yeah, black's position is very difficult at this moment. Short castle is not possible because knight g5 and we are mating. So black can protect with queen f6, but here we can even castle short with ideas like knight e4, hitting the queen, and then the knight is going to fall on g7, so very tough position. I mean, normally we are not castling long, but when we do, it's pretty much a sign that our advantage is extremely big. So the best move is probably knight to f5, but again, this knight is just going here and there, not finding its place, and then queen f4. Yeah, white has a really good position. For example, if short castle, we can already consider playing with g4 and later h4, h5. We can keep the king even here in the center for a while. And what I can tell you, that computer even already offers to play knight d4 just to give up a pawn basically for no reason, to avoid bigger problems. So this is just, it's not good for black. But bishop g4 is also not solving black's problems. Here queen e3 was played, which is a good move. Probably I like bishop takes f8 better. So now again the point is that if king takes, then queen h6, and then the knight moves to g5 or to d2. And if rook f8, then again this knight g5, h6, knight e4, and black's position looks like a huge mess. These pieces are completely misplaced. I mean, the king is in the center, and there is a pawn hanging on h6. So yeah, it also looks like a disaster. But what was played is also very strong. Queen e3 check. Okay, so now queen e7, and white decided to trade queens, which is also a completely decent idea. And okay, in the game, black actually took back with the bishop. Maybe king e7 is a better move to at least get rid of the the h6 bishop, but okay, now we can just, for example, take on f8, rook f8, and knight d2. Okay, so what we have here, like basically black doesn't have any counterplay on the queen side, so b5 is blocked. Our knight can go to c4, and then our majority can go forward like e4, f4, and so on. So even on, if everything is super ideal for black, which is like even hard to, like, okay, let's say the bishop is on c8, knight is coming to d7, black is playing f5, knight f6, such moves. So even black is in time to make all the good moves, even then white is better. But what is really bad here, that black cannot even develop with knight d7 because of this awkward bishop on g4. So if knight d7, then of course there is f3, and after bishop f5 we can choose if we want to trap, we want to give a fork or just trap the bishop with e4. So it's a complete disaster. So believe it or not, best move for black in this position is to play bishop to c8. The bishop is that horrible on g4, and the knight has to come out on d7. Now we play knight c4 again with the tempo, knight d7, and now we can play g4. So like in the worst possible version black is getting in this endgame, and it's really like a huge suffering without any counterplay. White is basically better everywhere on the board. So yeah, so bishop e7 was played instead, and again the key move here is not to allow black to get rid of this bishop, which basically doesn't have any good square. So knight d2 was played obviously, and knight f6, e4 was played, and the same problems for black. The knight cannot simply come out on d7 because then we play f3 and the bishop is lost. So black played bishop to c8, very sad move, but nothing better. And okay, I don't know, maybe it was just a rapid game or some shorter time control game on the internet. There are ways to improve white's play, but what he did was also completely fine. So just playing f3 first, avoid any type of knight g4 to kick this bishop out. So f3 is very nice. Knight d7, now the knight came to c4, knight to e5. And yeah, again, I believe because of the shorter time control, it definitely wasn't a classical game on the internet. So here, white already had a way to win material with bishop to g7. So rook goes to g8, and then we take f6, like very straightforward takes, knight d6, and okay, again king d7, knight c8, rook c8. So if we would allow just one move for black, like we would play something like bishop e2, then after g5, I would say black has some chances to survive, but of course we play f4 and we don't allow black to establish any sort of blockade, so white is just winning here. So instead of this, knight takes e5 was played, also good, but not winning material, de, and then okay, a typical move and strong one is to play a5, so just isolate black's pawns on the queen side, and we have a strong pass pawn in the center, so of course this position is also huge advantage for white. And so the game went like this: king f2, king e7. White was just bringing the pieces, and here he went knight a4. So I would say this is probably a little bit inaccurate, although it's also good. So like it's fine to get the pair of bishops, but the position is close. So maybe a move like knight b1 with ideas to get into c4 was even stronger. So knight a4, king d8, bishop g5. Okay, king d8 is actually a blunder. Bishop to g5. is deciding the game, because on bishop e7 I give you a little time to find the way for white to win. Okay, I hope you found that it's bishop takes on f6, bishop takes on f6, and knight c5, because you can be easily tempted to play that it's obviously d6, but then after knight takes on e4, actually the tables are maybe turning around fe and then bishop g5, so you have to be careful. But yeah, bishop f6 just wins a pawn. So black played king e7 back, but after knight b6, rook c7, knight c4, the game has continued, but it's effectively over, because we take on f6 and d6 in any order in the next two moves, and that's picking up a full piece, so the rest doesn't require any commentary. So this was against bishop e7. The key idea is to play bishop h6 and then to support it with queen d2. So another move is f6. So it looks more logical because it wins the tempo. Also, we cannot go with the bishop to h6. We cannot return to f4. But the problem is that, of course, once the pawn is on f6, it's definitely not going to go back to f7, which means that this square on e6 can be a target for white. So bishop to d2, bishop g7, normally how the games are going. Black can also start with f5, but it's not really changing anything. Our play is pretty much the same, so we play e4. So now, for example, in such cases, there is no reason to play with e3. So like then we would just, close our bishop on d2, and it's we have some advantage in the development. We have 3 pieces out versus 1. Like now we have to play in a completely different way to punish black for this early knight jump. So yeah, we do that with e4, bishop g7, and then okay, we can develop with a check, bishop b5, bishop d7, simply castling, then take f5, bishop f5, and knight g5, for example. So normally this is what we are aiming for, trading the pawns, trading our e-pawn in order to open the e-file, and then the knight is going to e6. So that's effectively our plan. So bishop d2, bishop g7 first. And here e4 is this game of Schengelia, which I am going to show you and probably recommend as well to play like this. There is an even more direct solution, but it's a little bit computerish, I would say, and maybe not so easy to handle. So there is this queen a4 check. So, okay, black is gonna play bishop d7. I mean, what else? Like, definitely not knight d7, because then g4 is trapping this knight. So bishop d7, queen e4. And I would say that everything is really good if queen e7 happens, because now white has this move g4. So okay, it's trapping the knight. So basically black has no other choice than to take e4. Knight takes, bishop takes, and then we give a check, king goes somewhere, and then we take another pawn, and this endgame is pretty much winning already for white. But if on queen e4 black finds this move king f7, I mean, he is still lost according to the computer, but the position can be extremely chaotic, and we don't have any we don't have any clear way to play. So that's just, I mean, of course, I mean, it's a good position, and you can play, but maybe the alternative is even easier. So this is just very messy. So the point is that if we play g4, seemingly trapping the knight, then black has f5 in many cases, and okay, it can get really complex. So on king f7, the correct move is to move the queen again to c4, which looks like an awkward square, but it supports g4 still. It goes away from f5. And now a6 can be played, and now computer recommends h3, b5. So these are the moves which you normally don't want to allow, but queen d3, and we have an extremely strong threat of g4. If black goes f5, then we have knight g5 check, for example. So the good move is some bishop f8. And if you want to practice such position, I mean, it's, again, objective evaluation is that it's much better for white, but I would say that it has nothing to do with normally how we play in this course. So but again, for practice, it's excellent. So like the position is very funny in a way that black has a ridiculous position on the king side. White did some dance with the queen to achieve that, but in the meantime, black also managed to play this b5, a6, b5, which you kind of never allow. So there are pros and cons. Objectively, it's very good for white, but I would say it's far from easy to play this position. So just imagine that if in some way, like I don't know, like bishop comes out, rook goes, and if black can put his king into safety, then it can be a double-edged game even. So anyway, in case you are interested, that's objectively maybe even stronger, but okay, we are not computers, so I mean, how this game went with e4, I just like. So e4, black castled, and bishop to e2. So like this looks very good to me. So now this knight is completely sidelined. The only way for black is to bring it back is to push f5 and also open the bishop, and this is exactly what happened in the game. So white went knight g5, targeting this knight. Knight to f6, e takes on f5. So everything is according to this plan, which I already showed you. Bishop takes on f5 and short castle. So what we have here is that this knight ready to jump to e6. We are gonna bring the rook to the e file. So in case we have to recapture with the pawn, we will have a very strong pawn there. And yeah, it's not clear how black should create counterplay. And okay, basically they cannot do anything with the e6 square. So that's just weak. So black went knight a6. So if immediately plays h6, then we just jump. He has to take, and knight c6. So this can be a point of immediate h6 that the knight can develop there. The pawn is not hitting on c6 anymore, but now the problem is that white can play bishop d3 and just target the weakened king side. So for example, if g5 is coming, then we just play f4, and with the bishops, the rook joining, the queen joining later, it's just very tough to defend this position as black. So knight a6, and again, not necessarily the only way, but okay, white plays with a very clear concept. He just took this knight on a6 because okay, if it reaches c7, then it's some protection against e6. So let's just take it. Pawn took back, and then knight went to e6. So basically, again, there is no option for black. Even if they want to leave this knight on e6, they cannot because it's an exchange. So takes, and yeah. The problem is that it's very hard to do anything with this e6 pawn because these pieces are not gonna attack it, and rook is coming to e1. We can also play bishop g5 with ideas later to bring the knight to d5, or just queen d2 and rook a d1. So black has to react pretty quickly here, and okay, the plan was to play d5. So something like queen d6 and then bring the rook and try to attack this pawn on e6. But okay, now white played rook to e1. It's a very good move. Now e7 is huge. So black has to prevent this and go to d6 with the queen. And here white did a slightly inaccurate move. Basically, he just didn't choose the correct move order. I mean, so basically we have two moves here: e7 or bishop to g5. And white first went e7, and bishop g5 was actually a better move. So now the threat is clear. We want to take f6, and the pawn on d5 is hanging after that. And yeah, whatever black does, it's not going to be good. So if rook is coming to e8 now, then we simply take, and knight d5. And this is winning a lot of material. So for example, if rook takes on e6, then rook takes, queen takes, and knight c7 is winning. So if the other rook goes to e8 to attack the pawn, then again we have bishop takes f6. And here it would be good, really good for black to take back with the rook. And then, you know, if you take on d5, then maybe trade, and then rook f e6. All of a sudden not so clear, but the game finishes after knight e4. So the queen is unprotected, and the knight cannot be taken, and we just win material. So black has to take back with the bishop, but then after a few trades, I mean, such position is close to hopeless because of the power of this e6 pawn. So basically black cannot counterattack on e6. He also cannot protect. I mean, that's of course important because then we have e7. So there is a move d4, but now e7. So this move order is a little bit more precise. And now black has to go rook f2 e8, and then queen b3, king h8, and then rook e6 is deciding the game. We are taking on f6 in the next move with the winning advantage. So instead, white went e7, rook f e8, and now bishop to g5. So everything looks the same. I mean, if d4, then we are just going to transpose to the variation which I showed you, and indeed it was played in the game, but black had a better move. Here, rook a to b8. So basically the point is that it's attacking b2, and also if ever d4 comes, then queen b3 is not a check anymore. So black had the time for this move in this particular variation. And also the pawn on e7, I mean, it's not as strong as it's on e6, because, you know, unless we win right away, then the king can come closer, for example, the bishop can hit it, and so on. So it's, I mean, white is still much better in this position. We can take on f6 or just protect the pawn, or some rook c1 also, I believe computer was mentioning. But okay, the game would have continued here. White is not winning here, just better. So instead black went d4, and now queen b3, king h8, and not this rook e6 what I showed, but okay, what actually white chose is also very nice. So he decided to take on f6. So now bishop f6, if queen f6, then simply knight d5. So now the pawn is protected. There are threats with knight c7, and you know, we can just also double the rooks on the e file if nothing else. So black cannot do anything with the e7 pawn in this line. So took with the bishop. Now rook e6, queen d7, and I can imagine that black was maybe even hoping for this position, because he has a very nice trick. that in case of rook takes f6, there is not dc, which is losing easily, but queen takes on e7. And now the rook is hanging on f6, and also there is a back rank mate. So it would be even already a better position for black. But the move of Shengelia is just very, very nice. He plays queen d5, and that's just winning for white. So basically, I mean, if black takes, then just we take with the knight. Bishop is hanging, and knight c7 is coming very soon. So it's not possible. And also there is no rook e7, which is very important. It would protect the queen, but it would hang the rook on a8. So it's protects everything. Now queen c7, and one more precise move, queen f3. So not taking the bishop, but the queen f3, preparing the square for the knight. So black went bishop g7, knight d5, queen d7, and rook e1, and yeah, basically completely over, because black has no, like, black cannot attack anything. Black cannot challenge this knight. Black cannot attack e7 pawn. So basically we just need a breakthrough, and be also quite instructive. So black played king g8 to stop queen f7 ideas. And since all pieces are ideally positioned, white decided it's time to move the pawns, and since black is completely stuck after h4, there is no way to, like, protect the king. I mean, the e7 pawn is basically blocking or like preventing black to do anything on the king side. So the game finished by rook c8, h5, g takes on h5. I mean, there is nothing better, and there are many ways, but knight takes and queen takes, and black resigned at this moment. The simplest way is just to bring the rook and give a checkmate, and there is no defense against it. So these were the two games against this knight h5 variation. So you don't have to be afraid to develop the bishop because of some knight h5, because even though it's not going to h2, it is going to g5, and black doesn't have a good way to counter that move. So thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully see you soon.